Thank you. You know, I love life. You know, I love people. I love animals. I love birds. I love fish. I love all living things. But the prejudice and the discrimination and the racism that I have faced over my lifetime could have made me a hater. But my beginnings growing up in a small black community called the Marsh in Truro, Nova Scotia, filled me with such love and compassion for others that hate was impossible for me to internalize. You know, barriers are only obstacles in your path as you go through life. Imagine yourself as a 12-year-old black boy facing overt racism for the first time in your life. Imagine that you are with your friends from your elementary school, your white friends, and they decide to go to the pool room to play pool, and you go with them. You go into the pool room, and you're greeted by the unfamiliar smell of cigars, stale urine, and linseed oil. You go to the rack on the wall. You pick out a cue stick, long, straight, strong. And in your fantasy world of being in this pool room, where you have dreams of becoming this great pool player, this cue stick is to be your weapon in your quest for pool supremacy with your friends. As you're there, the owner, a tall, muscular white man, comes over and says, "You cannot play pool." You look at him. "I know I cannot play pool, but I will learn." "I said, you cannot play pool." Again, thinking he's referring to your skill level, you say, "I know, but I will learn." Then he comes over to you, and standing over you in a very menacing way, he says, "You people cannot play pool here." And for the first time in your life, you know what it's like to feel hatred to someone who treats you adversely because of your race or your skin color. I could not overcome the barriers that this racist owner had erected. I felt so helpless. I could feel the tears, just welling up in my eyes. I wanted to hit him. I wanted to take the cue stick and break it. I just wanted to run out of there. But I couldn't. There was nothing I could do. And there are many times, like many of you, I'm sure, where you're in that kind of situation and you want validation. You want revenge. I wanted that owner to feel the hurt that I felt. I wanted the owner to feel the pain that I felt. And I wanted that owner to feel the embarrassment that I felt. You know, I went to that pool room almost every day for a couple of months with my white friends. Not once did I try to play pool. But one day, that owner looked at me and said, "There's no one here today. Why don't you give it a try?" And that's how that pool room became integrated. At the age of 13, I was with my friends from my elementary school. We were really a very, very close group, coming from a very small elementary school going into a consolidated junior high school. And I had a crush on a young white girl in our group. And we met every day. We talked on the phone almost every day. One time she was having a party. She invited all of the white kids and none of the black kids. That night, the night of her party, she called me to keep me abreast of what was going on at the party. I can still recall sitting on the steps, talking on the phone to all of those white kids at the party. How do you think I felt? But those kids, they could not confront their parents. It was their parents who were making that racist decision to stop black kids and white kids from socializing together. We may not be able to overcome an obstacle or a barrier at a given time, but we do have the power to determine whether or not we accept the beliefs or the rationale which gave rise to the barrier. I'm proud to say that many of those kids rejected their parents' racist ideologies, and some remain my friends to this very day. You know, I remember growing up in my small community of the Marsh. In my community, we learned at a very tender or early age that we were a family. We were all family. We had to love one another. We were taught that we had to respect our elders, and to disrespect our elders was a cardinal sin. In my community, the African proverb of "it takes a village to raise a child" was truly implemented. Every mother in our community was a mother to every child. It was the strength of that community, the cohesion, the love, the togetherness that gave me the strength as I went through my life to overcome many of the barriers that I have faced. After a short stint in the Canadian Army, I went to Toronto. When I was in Toronto, I recall I had an excruciating toothache. My friends told me, "Call Dr. Best." I called his office. I got an emergency appointment, and I went in. I was in the dentist's chair, and this black man came in. "Who are you?" I said. "Dr. Best," he replied. I had never seen a black professional in my life. I had never seen a black dentist or a black doctor. Growing up in Truro, my life was filled with my role models, my parents, other members of my community. None were professionals. So I looked at this black dentist and said, "Just examine me. I'll come back and let you know what I want you to do." You see, even though I was brought up in a very pro-black, positive environment, I had adopted the negative stereotypes that were perpetrated by the white people that were around. And because of that, I felt shame, I felt frustration, I felt fear, I felt rejection of this doctor who looked like me. And in fact, it may be said that that was self-hatred, that I was actually hating myself. And I knew that in order to overcome this feeling, to overcome this insecurity, I had to relook at my life. I had to revamp my position. So I went back to school. I began reading black books. I began going to meetings in the black community. I changed my hairstyle. I changed my dress. I even changed my concept of beauty. And I became active in the civil rights movement. I traveled throughout Canada and the States, speaking at rallies, getting involved in demonstrations. And I did all of that as a way of coming to grips with the fact that we as black people were oppressed, but we had to be responsible to liberate ourselves. After I was in Toronto and went through that experience, I moved back to Nova Scotia. At that time, because of my involvement in the civil rights movement, the RCMP had me under surveillance for years, just because I believed that we had to make changes in our society, and I was prepared to stand up for what I believed in. When we were in Nova Scotia, my former wife, Joan, and myself bought a house. The day before we moved in with our 5 children, that house was set on fire. Our house was set on fire a second time. I remember the night. It's so vivid in my mind. It was about 1 o'clock in the morning. Bang, bang, bang on the door. A voice yelling, "Your house is on fire. Get the children out." Our children, 5 children, little babies, they lived at the back of the house on the 2nd story. It was a 3-story building. Someone had taken kerosene oil and poured it all over the back of the house where my children were sleeping and set it on fire. I was so scared. I was frightened of what would have happened, that could have happened to my children. And I felt guilty. I felt guilty because the first time our house was set on fire, I should have taken precautions. I could have had motion sensors or outdoor lights or something. But in my naivety, I did not believe that in Halifax, Nova Scotia, Canada, something like this could happen. That racism was so deeply ingrained in people's minds that they would be prepared to burn up little kids. I was afraid of the police who had me under surveillance, and yet they couldn't see the fire. I was afraid of the people who wrote those poison letters to us. I was afraid of the people who made those threatening telephone calls to us. But most of all, I was afraid of those things that I created in my own mind. Those barriers, those obstacles, those demons that I created filled me with fear. I could not overcome that fear. I just had to learn to live with it. And I'm sure that many of you have created your own demons and barriers and fears. I'm sure that you, each and every person in this room, has made a mountain out of a molehill. It's us, each and every one of us, who create those barriers in our own minds that we ourselves must overcome. Personally, I've had a pretty good life, fairly successful life. But I haven't overcome my own barriers. I'm still fighting to change things. I'm still trying to climb over the obstacles or under the barrier or to go around the barrier. But as I go through and continue with this battle that goes on and will go on throughout my life, I'll always remember what my mother taught us when we were little children, when she was talking about white people outside our community. And she would look at us and she would say, "Remember, you're just as good as they are." Thank you.